Having learned so much about object-oriented programming, it's now time to apply that knowledge. In lesson 13.1, we created a simple game using object-oriented, and in this lesson we'll use a maths example. Specifically, we'll create an object which will store fractions. So in this lesson we'll think what the attributes of a fraction might be, and we'll create a constructor and instances of that fraction type, and then we'll think what methods might be used with fractions and how we could use inheritance to create subclasses of fraction. A fraction may be defined entirely using two numbers, the numerator and the denominator. Those are the numbers above and below the line. Given that, can you create a constructor for a class called fraction? I'll show you on the next slide. So this is the constructor for a class called fraction. The upper and lower numbers are passed as parameters from the main program, and in this example I've created a fraction called my fraction, which is 3/4, 3 as the numerator and 4 as the denominator. So can you create this now if you have not done so already? Thanks. Here's the class diagram. The fraction has a numerator and a denominator. I'm going to create more methods now to go with the fraction. A print string method which will display the fraction. Another method which will return the decimal value of the fraction. And then we'll think about creating methods to allow us to add or subtract and do other mathematical operations with fractions. Here's the main program. The user's entering the numerator and the denominator, and then the program is creating an instance of the fraction class called myFraction, created with that numerator and denominator. There are then a couple of methods which we haven't written yet, so let's do the first one. This line says print the fraction. At the moment we have not told the computer how to print the fraction, so if you ran this program now it would just print out the location in memory of the object as a long hexadecimal number. So let's change that. Let's make this fraction print method. So below the constructor method we'll create a string method which will return a string that represents the fraction, and I've done this by turning the numerator and denominator into strings and separating them with a / character, and that will represent the fraction. So our program will now print out whatever fraction we define in that format. You can try it. There's still a line that we haven't fixed though. This line prints out the decimal value of the fraction, and so we need to create a new method now called decimal, which will return the decimal value of the fraction. I'm not going to keep saying it, but really I think it's a very good idea for you to try and stay ahead of me, because I'm pretty sure that you know how to do these things, and it will show that you can do it without like taking the training wheels off sort of thing. So, but I will show you that method in a minute or two, in a second or two. So here's the third method, the decimal method. It simply returns the numerator divided by the denominator, and that will be a decimal value. And so that your whole program will now work. So if you've not done this already, here is the complete class definition so far. We're also going to use inheritance. If you remember, we create a base class, or sometimes called a parent class or a superclass, and then we can generate other classes from it, and that's known as inheritance. the subclasses or child classes inherit all the attributes and methods of the original class, but with some tweaks of their own. So what I'm going to do is create new classes for types of fraction such as halves or quarters. They'll inherit all the methods that we've written already. We won't have to write those again, but we'll set the denominator in advance. So if a fraction is a half, then the denominator has to be a half. So let's see how that would look. So I've created a new class called quarter, and can you see that after the word quarter, the word fraction is in brackets? What that means is that the class quarter inherits all the attributes and methods of the class fraction, unless we overwrite any of them with new definitions. And in fact, I have overwritten it because the constructor only takes one parameter, which is the numerator, and the denominator, if we're talking about quarters, the denominator is always 4. And there's our program. Enter the numerator, create a fraction, and then we can print it and we can show the decimal value. We haven't had to rewrite those methods. We're just using the methods from the fraction class, which we've already defined. One thing to note here is this will only work if you add all of this at the bottom of the program where you've already defined the fraction class. Later on, we could save the class definition and simply import it like we imported random. That's another thing to look into, but for now we'll do it all in the same program. So to recap, if you've been following along through this program, you should have created a fraction constructor with the 2 attributes. You should have created instances of the class and the print string and decimal value methods. And you should have created a child class called quarter, which inherits all of these methods. So I'm going to leave you with some further programming to do with the fraction class. In order to do maths with fractions, I think it's quite important to be able to simplify fractions to their simplest form. So for instance, turning 2 quarters into a half, or turning 4/16 into a half, or whatever. So we simplify fractions down to the simplest possible form. Once you've done that, you should be able to create methods that let you add and subtract fractions and also multiply or divide fractions. So all of these, particularly if you've got a bit of a talent in maths, you could create a complete fraction system which lets you do calculations with fractions. And then of course this and or Gorgatron you hand in to show what you've achieved in the OOP topic. And we're going to start a completely new topic soon, so make sure that you've completely understood everything that we've been learning for the last 3 weeks. Okay, so bye for now.